Hi everyone, it's Evgenia with you again, and if you're interested in video analytics for retail and maybe some new technologies, this summary is for you. Hi Adrian, how are you?
Hi, yes, nice to see you. Very well, thank you. Very well.
So we had this session recently around video analytics, but prior to this session, we actually did a survey from amazing amount of retailers. It was, I believe, 81 responses. So can you tell us about what did we find during this survey, and also what was the session about?
Yeah, sure. We spent a bit of time contacting, as you say, quite a lot of retailers to get their feedback on the various types of video analytics that they were either using at the moment in their organizations or planning or trialing to use in the near future. So we were looking at, what's here and now and what may be coming in the future. And we were only focused on video analytics. So the idea that we can use the video data to really try and identify automatically when things are happening that may be of interest to retailers, or get the analytic to do something for you without having your intervention. So using analytics in two different ways. And we were very much interested in what retailers were using at the moment. In the end, we were really interested in the use of these analytics across different types of retail environment. So around the retail store itself, as you enter a store, as you're walking around the store, the checkout experience, obviously, how analytics may be used in the back of a retail store, and then finally, the use of analytics in the retail distribution center. So we were looking at all these sort of different spaces in how video analytics were being used or planned. And in the end, we put together a list of 47 different types of analytics, which was an interesting exercise in terms of just the breadth and depth of ways in which analytics can now be used in the retail environment. So that's what we set out to do with the survey, and we got a pretty good response from retailers all over the world, actually, not only from Europe but also Australasia and America. And to summarize what we found, and we'll be producing this data in a short report that people will be able to access. What we found was that the most common types of analytics were those which had a relatively straightforward use case, particularly those around looking to see whether intruders can be identified who may be trying to get into a retail store or into a distribution center. But equally, the idea of exception reporting around risky spaces in and around stores and at the back of stores. And then we also found the use of automatic number plate recognition as well was relatively common. 20% of all respondents said that they were now using that as a means of access control. So particularly delivery trucks arriving at sites and their number plate being automatically recognized, which meant they could get into the building without needing any human intervention. So they were sort of the main ones that were being deployed thus far. But I think what was interesting when we look at what people are planning, we're really seeing quite a shift in the types of analytics that people are now thinking about using in the future. And in particular, what we saw with the grocery respondents was a real emphasis on using a range of analytics at the checkout. We've seen this big growth in the use of self-checkout and concerns being raised about the levels of loss associated with it. And now what we're seeing is a number of different analytics now being trialed or planned to try and help manage that particular problem. Identifying non-scanning, for instance, at the checkout, mis-scanning of items, customers walking away and not paying, and so on. So that was the real dominant trend we saw moving forwards. And for the non-grocery sector, they too had an interesting checkout, but also one of their most interesting ones was around trying to identify suspicious behavior in the aisle of stores. So can we begin to try and identify people who may be stealing things in the aisle? Was an analytic that was seen to be one that may be planned or trialed in the near future. But also the use of these approaches around trying to identify exceptions, either outside a store or inside the back of a store where people are entering spaces where they shouldn't be. So in the end, Eve, we got a wealth of data really on the use of a range of different types of video analytics that are currently being used now, but also those that are being planned in the future.
And what about business intelligence? Did we include that, or it's another set of analytics which is still to analyze?
Yeah, it's a tricky area to define, isn't it, what we mean by video analytics? And so we did have a definition at the beginning which didn't necessarily include business analytics. These were ones where we were trying to identify the ones that have been used in these different retail spaces. But you're right. I mean, there's a wealth of other potential analytics around business intelligence that we could have included, but we didn't in this particular survey.
So in this case, we were focusing really on the security applications rather than people counting queues and all others. So, and we already had 47 scenarios, which is quite a large amount to process. And I think we will be looking in the future on that other side, which goes beyond security applications, but can be used from the security equipment, like a camera can be used for security analytics, but also for business intelligence at the same time. So that's very interesting. So what did we hear from retailers during the session? What were the main kind of 3 findings or surprises you've heard during the session?
I think what we found from those who contributed to the session was for them, this is actually what they expected. There was no great surprises here in terms of the types of analytics that were most commonly used at the moment. And certainly within the world of grocery, the ones who were involved in that part of the retail industry, they were very clear that the checkout is now a really hot spot in terms of trying to get video analytics to help them utilize that space. I think what we also heard was, and we know this, don't we, from our previous conversations around this, that video analytics are quite difficult to get to work well in complex environments. They're very good at doing quite simple things, but when you begin to introduce them into more complicated spaces, it can be hard to roll them out to lots of locations because they need a lot of tailoring to their particular environment. And certainly respondents really illustrated this point in terms of them primarily using video analytics in relatively straightforward ways. Is there somebody there or not? Has a door been opened or not? Rather than perhaps some of the more complex ones, such as, can we actually identify the behavior of somebody who may be a shoplifter in a very complicated aisle environment within a retail store? And so I think retailers are very keen to really share their experiences of using video analytics so far anyway, in fairly limited and straightforward ways in recognition of the challenges that can come from using it in more complicated environments.
And what I found quite interesting that there were several retailers who brought up the point that when they started the POC, they didn't really know will they be able to implement it on the larger scale, like you mentioned. And before you go into this POC stage, it's a very important exercise to create the business case around it and to understand actually the scope of work and the resource behind it. So who will be working with outcomes? Are we able to install this analytic on the scalable basis that will actually bring you that return on investment? Will the installation and investment be higher than the problem itself? So I think those are very important questions, which are kind of standing a little bit further from technology, but in reality, they need to stand in front of using the technology rather than pulling the technology to how do we use this new thing. We need to understand what is the outcome, and do we have resources, and do we have ability to make it on the scalable basis. So I think that is my takeaway, that it should be this business case workshop always before POC. It needs to be clear KPIs, time frames, and then understanding what is the resource, who is going to use it, how they're going to use it.
Yes, no, that's absolutely right. Sorry.
Interestingly enough, the next session is going to be around video analytics, and it's going to be about LPR. Tell us about that one.
Yes, the license plate recognition or number plate recognition, as it's described in the UK, it's been around for a long time, and At the moment, though, it isn't really being used very much for a lot of different use cases. It's just primarily just to monitor, often just car parks. Are people entering who should be entering, and are they staying too long? And therefore, do they need to be fined if they've stayed too long in a car park? And I think what we're beginning to see now is retailers thinking about how they can begin to use this data beyond that use case. And so we're going to hear from a retailer in New Zealand, for instance, who's been using it in collaboration with the New Zealand police to try and track stolen cars, for instance, or give warning to their staff that somebody who's been involved in crime in the past has entered the store, or certainly entered the car park with a vehicle that has been associated with crime in the past. So as a way of trying to alert them to a potential risk. So I think we're going to look at, how are now people beginning to get more out of ANPR, because it is a very well established video analytic that has been so far, I think, not really used to its full potential.
Quite interesting. So we're going to have it on 13th of April, and it's going to be 3 p.m. UK time. So we're really looking forward to seeing you there. And, thank you for listening to us.
Cheerio.